2-year-old Cherish Ohamadike was flogged 24 strokes of cane by her teacher, one Miss Joy Igile, who inflicted marks on her back. Thankfully, she survived the experience. But little Hanifa Abubakar was not so lucky, as she was kidnapped and brutally murdered by her supposed caregiver, while Obinna Udeze was also flogged by his teacher and died afterwards. But the autopsy carried out reveals that little Obinna died from septic shock and not from the trauma suffered from being flogged. These events elicit questions on the appropriateness of corporal punishment meted out on pupils enlisted in elementary schools. Child rights lawyer Bisi Ajayi Kayode explains the place of corporal punishment within the context of other supporting legal instruments.
Corporal punishment is abolished under the Child Rights Act, under the Child Rights Law of Lagos State. The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act is violated. Often there is a conflict between human rights and legality.
As contained in the National Policy on Education, formal education begins from pre-primary education as provided in daycare centers and nursery schools to children aged 3 to 5 years. But should parents now begin to rethink this age range due to the unwholesome outcomes for toddlers?
I remember those days, if your hand cannot touch your hair, that you are not supposed to go to school. So unusually, before you can do that, you are either 4 to 5 years. And then you are able to understand and comprehend.
2 to 3 years after a mother weans her child are critical to the child's development. And where the mother is a career woman, she must return to her work or business. The question is, what are the options available for childcare at this tender stage?
Those days, you have aunties and mothers coming to nurse your baby until the child is about 1 year and 6 months and all that. But these days, you don't have that. Hardly you see parents or house helps. You are not even, so sure with the house help. You are not free with the house help. So because of that, you see people going to daycare, making sure that children are within an environment, at least to some extent, that they can take care of these children.
The government is not directly involved in the establishment of daycare centers and nursery schools, but it maintains oversight for the provision and management of pre-primary institutions. Channels Television gathered that there are 18,000 private schools in the nation's commercial capital, but only 5,000 are duly registered with the state government. To buttress this, covert audio interviews obtained from the proprietress of a private school in Lagos reveals that her school has been operating without a license for 15 years.
The certification is gradual processing they gave us. After that name search, they still give us some years before we can totally do everything. Okay, for how long have you been operating? I have released my 15th year. I'm in this school. Yes.
In Delta State, the number of privately owned primary schools stands at 1,548, but it is unclear what percentage of this number operate without government approval. And in Kano State, the decision to withdraw the certificates of all 200 private primary schools for revalidation after the gruesome murder of little Hanifa is evidence of the lack of confidence in the competence of the educators to operate in that state.
For a private school to be set up, it must be approved and recognized by state government. And for those that have not been registered, so many of them have been shut down. And even those that we've approved that are not also upgrading their facilities, we also have cause to shut some of them down.
There are so many of them. And obviously we don't have enough schools to take in these children if we close down their institutions. So why don't we help them and work with them through the process of becoming approved? Because once they are approved, then they have certain minimum facilities and they can actually look after the children. And of course, once they are approved, we do have annual surveys, annual reviews. We have a quality assurance department that goes out periodically to see that they're doing what they're supposed to do. So we are going to set up a task force now.
This unwholesome trend also raises concerns on the ideal qualification of a teacher placed in the care of toddlers.
To look after toddlers is a skill on its own. And you know, like all skills, it can be taught, and it should be. We do have higher institutions even in Lagos State. The Adeniran Ogunsanaya College of Education, for instance, has a program for what they call caregivers, for people who are taught the psychology of these young infants, the best way to look after them.
With the huge number of private schools in some of the 3 states under review operating without state government certification, and the inability of most private sector operators to employ teachers with qualification in childcare psychology, mothers are left with the options of either registering their toddlers in the mostly unregulated daycare centers or enlist them in elementary schools well before they are ready. A choice between the rock and the hard place. And bearing in mind the incidents referenced in this report, parents can only hope and pray that their toddlers will come out unscathed. Bukola Samuel Wemimo for Channels Television News.